And I was. Read it at night, trying to calm this down, you know, it's one of those kinds of books that. I love books. And I'm glad. Yeah.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the January 27th meeting of the Portsmouth School Board. Can I have the roll call, please, Patty?
Absolutely. Jennifer Shump.
Here.
Pip Klutz.
Here.
Stephen Adler.
Here.
Byron Maddow.
Here.
Brian French.
Here.
Lisa Rappaport.
Here.
Nancy Clayberg.
Here.
Tish Campbell.
Here.
Lee Hudson.
Here.
Eric Moore.
Here.
Nathan Delaney.
Here.
Thank you. Can we please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Any announcements?
I just wanted to congratulate Lister Academy on Friday. They ran a symposium in connection with UNH Extension around the integration of New Hampshire agriculture, integrated New Hampshire agriculture into the classroom. And of course, it was talking about their maple programs. And so they had teachers from around the region come in as part of this day-long symposium. Most of the presenters, not all, but most of the presenters were from Lister, and it wasn't just teachers. We had multiple students who were involved in presenting to educators from around the region who are interested in creating their own maple programs. Talked about kind of the work of what they do, and some of it was around actually what they're doing in the maple syrup process and how they do it at Lister. But it was neat to have students talk about educating other students and working with third graders and what that was all about. So really a great experience for students, any students, but particularly students in that program to walk out and feel like I'm the expert today with a whole bunch of educators from around the region and people who are in agriculture. So it was nice to be able to sit in for a little while and see them do their stuff, and kudos to them around the program, and also just kind of the ongoing outreach with other communities about what's happening, and then putting students over and over again in positions to have real life experiences that are going to be meaningful and where they get to be the expert. So kudos to Lister. Thank you.
It's an amazing program. Any other announcements, anyone?
Actually, go one more.
Oh, sorry.
I wasn't pointing at Byron or Pip. It was one more. I also just wanted to thank DPW in our crews over the last couple of days. We have a long duration storm like this. People are going in shifts, and so for our guys and gals, it's coming in, it's doing a couple hours of work, it's going home, go get a nap, then you're coming back in on the next wave. With DPW, there were people, sleeping on cots up at DPW to try to get all this stuff going. And I remember when Kenny and I were looking at the forecast on Thursday, part of the conversation was, okay, Monday's probably toast, but we're already thinking, can we save Tuesday? And so a lot of thought and hard work. And when DPW went through the challenges, I know yesterday, one of the things we're always worried about too is we have a lot of walkers in the district. So when we went out, when I went out, was cruising around the city yesterday at 10 or 11 o'clock, DPW did an outstanding job. Sidewalks were in pretty good shape all over the city. They were moving tons and tons of snow all over the place. And then people started to wake up and go out into their driveways. And then by 2 o'clock, the sidewalks were a mess with people whose plow guys had come and pushed all the snow up against the sidewalks, or people who shove it out and threw the snow into the sidewalks. And we were, as of last night, the concern was, and then we got a burst of snow, at 8 to 9 o'clock. It was, will we be in a position to, after we had called the delay, are we going to stay with the delay, or are we going to be able to open? as always, Kenny and his guys had everything, really well done on our end. It was just all the work that DPW had to do, and they did a great job of being really responsive. We identified places we needed them to concentrate on. And so between, I don't know, it was about, 3:45 this morning when we were driving around looking at spots, trying to pick out stuff to around 6 or 7. They were great at having multiple tractors out there hitting all those spots. Now, we did not hit every single spot in the city, but I think they did a pretty darn good job. And I just wanted to thank them for working with us and putting in all the work that they did. So thanks.
I guess I'll just mention one thing since we're on that topic. Just wanted to thank Zach and the other persons involved in notifying the district of the snow day and the 2-hour delay, because the students expressed their appreciation of being in the loop this time. So just wanted to.
You guys all asked for it, so it changed just like that. Bam.
They were
Time.
appreciative, so I just
Okay.
wanted to thank you on that.
And the parents in my house appreciated not getting a wake-up call when it was the
Well,
day we
there
could
you go.
sleep in.
Great. There you go.
Any other announcements? All right, we will move on to the consent agenda. And just as a reminder for our new members, if you're absent from a meeting that is part of the consent agenda, you can ask to pull just that meeting out of the vote, or you can abstain if you were absent from all of the ones that are on the agenda. So we need.
I can move to approve January 13th. Minutes.
Second.
Both, regular. Second.
Would you be willing to throw in January 20th as well as a friendly
That's why
amendment?
I'm separating.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Sorry.
That's okay. We need a roll call vote because we have a member on Zoom.
I did have a comment about the January 13th. I was not there. However, the non-public meeting minutes look normal until you get to the bottom where we're still listing some people who are no longer on the board. I think it's just a matter of an old template being used, but we just may want to update that.
You make that motion.
Roll call vote, please.
Jennifer Shump,
Yes.
Pip Clues,
Stain?
Steve Adler.
Yeah.
Byron Matto,
Yes.
Brian French,
Yes.
Lisa Rappaport,
Yes.
Nancy Claiberg.
Yes.
Tish Campbell,
Yes.
Lee Hudson.
Abstain.
Can we have a motion to approve the January 20th workshop?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? Seeing none, can we have a roll call, please?
Jennifer Shump, Pip Clues,
Yes.
Stephen Adler,
Yes.
Byron Matto,
Yes.
Brian French,
Yes.
Lisa Rappaport,
Yes.
Nancy Claiberg.
Yes.
Tish Campbell.
Yes.
Lee Hudson.
Yes.
9-0.
We will now move on to public comment. If you would like to comment, I believe we had one sign up. Esther Kennedy, you're welcome to come and speak.
Question.
Yes.
Are you having public comment on the budget, or is it just this opportunity is the only opportunity? 'Cause it says public hearing on the budget.
Will you sign, you say you want to move your public comment to the
I
public
wasn't
hearing?
sure what.
Sorry,
I
yeah.
wasn't sure
Nope,
if that
my
was
bad.
at the budget or if that meant, because it just says public comment.
You signed up for the public hearing. I apologize. So that will be during the budget workshop. You would have the opportunity to speak. Does anyone want to speak at this time on anything outside of the budget workshop? Right? Anyone on Zoom want to speak? No? Okay, and with that, we will start our budget workshop session number 3 for the fiscal 27 budget.
Are we planning to begin with the public hearing? So. I think we'd have Pastor go ahead and speak, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
I think Peter needs, I don't think she realized you could sign up. Did you, Peter?
That's okay. There's just the two of you here. Come on up.
So as you go through your budgets, and reviewing it yesterday, I found a couple things that I had to question. One being the transition activities. There was 15,818 in there. And it was in the high school level. And I guess I was a little disappointed it went down to 0. Transitioning to adulthood for special needs children is very intense and you need funding for it. So I guess that was a disappointment that this year it's 0. So I couldn't find the transition activities anywhere else in the budget, so I just assumed that we're getting rid of them, which is also against the law. We have to, under the law, provide transition opportunity services in accordance with the IEPs as the IEPs are created. So I would hope that that would be revisited. I also noticed, and I've noticed this a couple of years, and I've said this a couple of times, that the social worker at the SAU, the district social worker, I wasn't quite sure why there's only one at the district level. And if there's some buried that we couldn't see, I couldn't find, but you know, I think social workers are important. They're almost more important than some of the other stuff in there. And especially someone that can deal with the families. And I was a little disappointed at that. There's still only one, and it seems to be only at the district level. So I'm assuming it's split across all the schools. Again, I could be wrong on that. Out of district students, as you know, that's my it went up this year again, which is sad. The other thing that's real sad is the way you presented it in your budget. You gave out of district students a number and you put them down, assuming that that's what, as I read it. So someone like myself, I can pretty much tell you where that student is at. It's a named notifier. You should never separate out particular individuals in a budget. And it's listed in that budget. I can tell that you have 5 new ones at the high school. In most districts across the board, we put out of district money, and we might say there's 5 students in that budget line, but we never do it independently. That's a confidential issue, folks. And that's sad. That's where we're at. So I'm requesting that you take it out, put a lump sum at each level. Has to be distinguished according to the MS-25 at each level. But you can say there's 20, I think it went up to 23 students. I know one of the students is 475,000, and then the next year it went down to 50,000. That's kind of a weird situation. But you know, you can put, there's 23 students and 1 figure. But to separate out the way it is a conventional nightmare, and I've never seen it in a budget like that before. You're distinguishing an individual student. Along those same lines, after talking about the 5 million plus, and if you add transportation, you're up to almost 6 million. There was nothing in your budget to show that you're going to look at programming. There was no funds anywhere that I could find in that budget that showed that you were going to look at coming into school. The only thing I saw in that budget was an addition of middle management. You added a special ed director assistant. Why are you putting money into middle management? Every one of our schools have a coordinator. You have 1,500 students because every sending district has their own LEA. Every sending district has their own special ed director. You only have 1,500 students in Portsmouth that are your students. And when it comes to the special ed world. Now, yes, according to contracts, you might be supporting some of those students. You're still billing the LEA that's sending into your district for those services. But I have a sending district into my district. You know, and we look at the Guilford district and I look at the Gilmington district. They're their own LEA, they can make their own decisions. Technically, under the law, you don't have that responsibility. So I guess I'm really upset that we put in a middle manager. You have coordinators in every one of your buildings at roughly 150,000 plus. You could use that money to create some great programs. You could use that money to really start talking about what is your school, how are you going to pull all those kids back? Because take the money out of it. Having this many students, and you added 5 more according to your list. This many students in our district out of their general peers, being out of their community is wrong in so many ways. Now, I have 1,200 students, and as I always say, I am zero placed. I haven't placed a child in 17 years. And it's all about the programming, it's all about your staffing. Think about what you could do with 150,000 if you've got 3 teachers or 3 social workers. You don't need the middle management. You have coordinators that are already doing the middle management. Ask your superintendent what the coordinators are doing in the building. They should be organizing and understanding the building and helping with the meetings. So then you have to ask what your director is doing. So that was very concerning that after all the stuff on the campaign trail about the out of district placements, after all the information that we brought forward, after what you all said, your out of district budget went up. And I didn't see anywhere in any of the line items. Could be wrong, but I don't think so. But you actually put in some opportunities to create programs, getting staff to do those programs, and at least getting some social work to help families so that you don't have to create anything and you can support those children in your school. So I encourage you to do that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, to speak on the budget. State your name, please.
Petrie Huda, Portsmouth. So I have handouts because I'm gonna talk about RSAs and I'm gonna talk about what I was looking for when I looked at this budget. So the first thing that I looked for after I went through I guess 3 or 4 iterations of the process here. It was very interesting to me in this presentation this year that we went over the process at least 3 times and the presentation has increased to about 221 pages, which is a little overwhelming for most of us to read. So the first thing that caught my eye was the summary of the budget. And the summary of the budget is, to me, it's basically useless because you don't have your actual spend in here. The first page, it's on page 1, you have 2025 and then you have 26 and 2027. So you have budget to budget. So I don't know how you could look at this and tell what you spent last year and even know where the money needs to go next year. Now, based on that, in the city's reports, you spent everything except $747 last year. So my questions would be basically, what did you spend it on? As a resident, I would like to know what you spend it on and how that relates to what you're going to spend it on. So then that takes me back to Municipal Budget Law, RSA Chapter 32. Now, I only made 3 copies for you, but I will read it for the rest of you. Basically, this tells you how to do budgets and what should be included. And it discusses who has to do it and who has to comply. And you'll see in every as it describes the definitions here, school districts are in here. So the one that I want to bring to your attention is, and you'll see it on budget preparation. So on budget preparation, budget forms for annual meetings shall include in the section showing recommended appropriations at your expenses, comparative columns indicating at least the following information: appropriations voted by the previous annual meeting, prior year budget, actual expenditures made pursuant to those appropriations, or in those towns and districts which hold annual meetings prior to the close of the current fiscal year, actual expenditures for the most recently completed fiscal year. All appropriations, including appropriations contained in special warrant articles recommended by the governing body. So when I look at what is presented to you in your budget, I don't know how you, as members of this board, can actually make a decision on anything here when you do not know what you spent last year on each one of your categories. And this goes right down through your whole budget. You have budget to budget. It doesn't mean anything. How much did you spend on different items? That is the question I implore you to ask. I made copies of Dover's. So as you go through everybody's budgets, which I did, all the school budgets, they're in compliance with 32A. You have a general fund summary in Dover. It has 23 expended, 24, 25 adopted, and 26. This, of course, is last year. So they know what they spent on each category, and they could look at it and they could move the money. And that's what basically your job is. So I would ask you to ask your administration to provide you with the correct data before you move on and try to make a decision on this, because I think you're missing the biggest part of this. The next thing I want to ask you about, and this would be for probably for your business administrator. Look at the water and sewer meeting about allocations of salaries. So what's happening on the city level is they are allocating salaries in the amount of $28,494 for an accountant. Now, I don't know how it works in municipal, but in corporate, when a manager bills another manager, you have the right to say, wait, I don't know what this person does. I don't know if I want to take this charge. I do not know if you had that opportunity, but I implore you to do that because you're responsible for what goes into your budget. The other question would be, if you do get billed for this, where is it? I don't see it. I don't know where it is. And if it's in a nondescript line, that's not a problem. But I wanted to make sure you knew that you do have the opportunity to say, no, I'm not taking this charge. This person isn't working 10 hours a week or whatever for me. Please don't bill me for that. Those are the things I have. I have 3 copies of the municipal budget law and what Dover is doing, and Dover is doing it correctly according to the law. So basically, what I'm looking for is compliance. Thank you.
Thank you.
Don't see anyone else in the room for public comments. Don't see any hands there. So we will move to the next item on the agenda, which is to review our organizational chart.
Oh,
Sorry, close. Always. We'll close the public hearing and then move on to.
So very often when I have handouts, I'm not giving to you them in advance when I'm walking through slides. But this time I am, because the slides are going to help you understand the handouts. So. Yeah, check on that.
We got this last year, right?
It is, yes, but this is a updated version, so. No.
Is everything in the handouts also in the slides?
It is not, but we can work on a digital version to send your way, Lee. But it'll give you, the slides will give you the gist
Okay,
of how to read it. This is more, it's more about how to read what we're giving you, and how that might help you in terms of analyzing the binder.
Okay.
So, let's pull up my. Cheers. Hey, I don't think I'm not. So a year ago, we shared with you for the first time a tool that we started using maybe 2 to 3 years into using this tool. One of the things we discovered, it's in relation to your binders, but it was also for us that we were having some challenges in terms of wanting to be able to better visualize our staffing, where staff were, how they were funded, and how they were supervised. And so we work with a app called Organimi. It's a dynamic organizational chart, and each year we're adding more and more information to that. So we think we initially had it as an internal thing. We wanted to make sure that we shared it with you because as you're going through your bind, I think it gives you a pretty good snapshot of what's happening. What you'll see on the chart is that staff are grouped by function and by school. And it also puts you in a situation to understand which of these staff are affecting local taxation and which ones are not. And so what you'll see is that with the staff, some staff they all have FTEs connected to them. So some staff are 1.0s and some staff are, in this case, in 0.89, and some will have a funding source listed connected with them. And so in this case, in this set of people in support services at New Franklin School, Vonda Cunningham, who's a literacy tutor, is someone who we pay for with Title I federal funds. The other folks that you see don't have a funding source listed underneath, so they are all general fund folks, which has the impact on the just in terms of you'll see a card for each of the different people in the chart. In that card, you've got a color code, which is connected to the building they spend most of their time in. In this case, yellow's PHS. You have the employee, their job title, again, the FTE. And then if there's an alternative funding source, which is not the general fund, we have a listing of that alternative funding source. Just to clarify, when you have groupings of people underneath certain categories, one thing I want to make sure is clear is that the number, like student academic services is what we call the special ed department at the high school. Brian Ryan is a coordinator. Just to mention, our special education building-based coordinators are teachers who are paid a stipend to do some work around the organization of meetings and that type of thing. I think it's a $4,500 stipend plus $50 or $75 per professional head they oversee. So in this case, Brian Ryan, who's on a teacher contract, is the SPED coordinator at the high school for the student academic services. There are 28 cards underneath him. That doesn't always work out to people, but for the most part, you get a ballpark of the number of people that are underneath Brian. And also just a reminder that the city, one of the things that's interesting, the city and its personnel summaries, when we get to the city budget binder later on this year, you'll see city works in full-time, part-time people who work for them, and that's how they do their summaries. We do it as full-time equivalents. So it gives you a little bit of and not a criticism of the city, but it gives you a little bit of a clearer picture because a part-time person could be a 0.89, they could be a 0.2. It gives you an idea of how much time. Those alternative funding sources that you will see, this is the set that will appear in that chart. So food service is generally a self-supporting program. So those people are paid for through the sale of food and reimbursements from the feds. 206 in your binder, category 206 is Lister Academy. Again, much of which is paid through tuition dollars, but not all. 207 is labeled as special education tuition in your binder, but that is really what that is SAU 50 incoming tuition dollars, and a portion of that comes off for us to cover special education programming connected to those students. IDEA is our funds, special education grant funds. Title I are funds connected to should not be listed as special education grants. They are not, but they are funds coming from the feds to address students who struggle. Originally were students, exclusively students who were of low socioeconomic status, but it's not limited to that. 21C is 21st Century Learning Grant. You'll see one person that appears that runs the after school program, MC3 at New Franklin School. That person is paid for through that particular program. And you'll see PD listed 2 times in here. Our school resource officers are, one is fully paid, the one at the high school is fully paid for through the police department. And the other is a split, the one at the middle school is a split between the school department. So just in terms of this helping you, I think, for me, I know that I have when I have the ability to look at both the binder and the chart, I think it helps me kind of understand things better. For example, a minute ago you had, back up on the example, we had Elizabeth Beamer. She appears in your binder under tab 207 as a teacher at the high school, but through the flow chart, you get an idea of like special education people are there at the high school. How many of those people are paid for through funds that do not affect the local property tax? So, those are all things we want to have you have a good conceptualization of, because very often in our budget conversations, I think compared to a lot of departments in the city, we have a lot of folks who are paid for through alternative sources that are very important. And so I think sometimes it's important to include those people as part of our conversation. So anyway, it's just a tool to help you and help inform your discussions. I'm happy to take any questions about the makeup of the chart, how it works, anything like that. Yeah, Brian.
The alternative funding sources, those monies come directly to the school department, or does that go to the city?
So it the mechanism of who touches the funds. I mean, we manage, so like Title I, for example. We go through a process where we're making decisions about how, in terms of who's making the decisions about how those funds are spent. We do the mechanism of who does the actual receiving and then how it gets funneled to us. But ultimately, it comes to us to control. So Title I, IDA, we're making those decisions. What am I leaving out? 207, we're making those decisions. 206 Lister, we're making those decisions. I don't think there's anything where we are.
207 is the SAU 50.
SAU 50, the break off of some of the tuition dollars from SAU 50 special education costs. So those are all, pretty much all those things are things we have control over in terms of making decisions about how the funds are going to be utilized. Some of those things, when it comes to special education, we're applying for reimbursement for. And there's a 1-year lag on when we get some of those funds back. So we effectively program for a year, notify the state of what our costs were, feed back to that money, and then a year later we see the influx of that revenue to offset the costs. The other ones are all as we go. So like with any of the title areas, we're applying on an annual basis. We're submitting plans to the state. We have to get those plans approved. How we plan to utilize the fund. And that's a kind of rotating annual basis as we go through those steps. Other questions about chart plans?
I think when you first introduced us to this, you had said that we'd be able to access it digitally. Are we able to do that at this point?
But one of the conversations we were having late in the week is around people's likeness and having them being available digitally.
Yeah.
So what I'm working on now, and this is late in the week, can I give you the same thing, full picture part, and give you digital access so it's easier to maneuver? So I think that's the goal.
God, because the picture part is so helpful.
So I think 2 things and we're still working on whether or not that's an issue. I think people were worried that years ago that was a policy. I think we moved away from that. But anyways, tonight, I wanted to make sure I did some follow-up before I went ahead and did that. But I agree with you. I think it's important to see those people. You know, and one, so when if you're a board member and you're in the district, you're like, oh yeah, right, this is what that person does and here's what they do. I also think it's good to humanize, like, here are all these people who work for us, who have advanced degrees, who have been here for 15, 20 years doing these things with kids that are hard and amazing. So I think it's also good sometimes to take it out of numbers, be like, oh yeah, there's these humans. So.
Yeah, I find it really helpful, I appreciate that you printed it for us very much, but if we could get access to it digitally too.
Yes, that's a goal, both for you and for the public. I need to answer that image piece. Yeah.
Thanks.
Nancy?
On page 33, they have special education case managers in this 4 people listed, and they all, what schools are they?
So in 33, for example, it's a little hard to follow sometimes, and it is easy, I agree with, it is on it, this is easy to navigate with this, just move all the way around. So 33, these are the other 4 case managers that are at Dundero.
Okay.
And so you have those folks, and then on that same up above, you have the paras who are from Dundero. And then you see at the top where it says, it has a little box that says page 31. So if you flip back to page 31, then you have Beth Watson, who's a board. So again, similar to what we're saying about the high school, this is a person on a teacher contract, and then they receive a stipend to help with some of the kind of organization of those types of things.
But you know it's Dundero because the yellow, is that yellow?
Or it's
Brownish.
orangey-ish.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, but also if you keep going back, you eventually get to the top of the Dundero route, which is Cape Callahan.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So,
Nice question.
yeah.
Go ahead, Jen.
On page 33, Alex Clitheroe has a box with a star in it.
So one of the things, there's no magic to that one. Sometimes we have underneath, if we have some other note that existed, so if someone was on leave,
Yeah, because
we're part of an alternative funding source or something like that. Right now, there's a bug in the program where if we had a note there, and just have removed it because it's no longer pertinent, it doesn't allow us to keep a blank. So we have to put something to just hold the old spot where there was something. So right now, you'll see like an asterisk. So that's usually, there was something there before that no longer.
and she's still currently a case manager at Dondero.
We
that.
we house her under this. Right now, we house her hierarchically under Dundero, but she's doing work across multiple schools right now.
So Dondero really technically has 3.
3 case managers, so 3 case managers under a 4th person who's the teacher case manager coordinator.
Other questions?
I just have one quick thing that I noticed on the world languages page, 65. So I'm gonna butcher the pronunciation of her name, but Aurelie Ledoux is down as a Spanish teacher. She's not in the budget. Honestly, never heard of her.
She's and it might be, I don't know if it's new. It's a long-term sub position. So it's not someone who's been there permanently. I'll check and verify on the timing and yeah. But the LTS is for long-term sub. She the one filling in? Oh, yeah.
That's usually what some does.
Well, no.
Yes, he's throwing some incoming fire. So typically, now I will say.
Now that she's not.
Please raise your hand first.
I will say this, and it's a good pickup because we usually do a different way of trying to indicate long-term sub stuff.
Yeah.
So an example I'll give you is, and so that's a little bit of a screw up on our part. Because if I go back to Dundero, I'll give you an example.
I do apologize because I know who she is and why she's in here, it just.
No, it was a great question. So let me go, but give you an example of usually how you see folks appear who are in long-term sub roles, because we also want to keep that kind of transparent to the board and the public. All right, so if you go to page 30. 30 of 96. It's in the fourth grade in Dundero. That's the fourth grade in Dundero.
Mhm.
You have three teachers listed. Now, two of those teachers, Shauna Comerford and Andy Goodwin, are both on leave at the moment, with anticipated returns for fall of the upcoming year. What we try to do in order to kind of keep track of and make it transparent to you and the public are who are the folks who are filling in for those folks who are on leave. So you'll have Samantha Panic is filling in for the permanent role, which is occupied by Shauna Comerford.
Mhm.
And Jen Saharko is filling in for the permanent role, which is occupied by Amanda Goodwin. So in the budget, and I'm not looking at the page right now, hopefully this is gonna all square, you'll see Comerford and Goodwin appear in for FY 27 between the two things.
Right.
And you wouldn't see Panic and Saharko because they are right now in 1-year roles, which end at the end of this year, filling in for those other folks who are on leave. So.
Jen, I see your hand, and then Byron.
I just had a quick question about at the different roles at the different schools, like what's the difference between like the literacy specialist that's for, I think, Dondero versus the reading specialist at Little Harbor versus literacy at New Franklin?
So a thing that has been I would say this, for the most part, no difference. But so this is the thing I know when we came in, Patty and I are both scratching our heads too when we first came into the district. And the example that was even different than that was around how we identified people in English language learning. So at one school, we had an ESOL teacher. At one school, we had an ESL teacher. At another school, we had an ELL teacher. And at the time when we first walked in, the kind of common naming for that would have been EL. And so we had different stuff across different buildings. So some of it we've caught up and cleaned up, but very often you'll see different things that are really for the same.
So those
They serve the same.
same roles, just
They do.
okay.
Yep. Good question.
Byron?
Back on funding source stuff, so.
Yeah.
As an example, for special education case managers at Dondero.
Yep.
Lindsay Hinman is funding source IDEA.
IDEA. Yep. Let me see.
And she is in the budget as a line item. There a condition wherein they can have a funding source and they don't show in the line item in the budget?
So, yeah, Brian, you want to talk about when people are appearing or not appearing?
Well, they're probably not an updated funding source. They may,
Okay.
because IDEA, they move in and out.
Okay.
We did move some in and out this year,
Okay,
only because it got too expensive, so.
so this is maybe the source of truth on,
That one.
Okay.
Because
Okay.
that's what we did during the budget season. I want to check.
because that is not something I would expect to see, is this funding source and then her in the line item, okay.
No, you shouldn't see a repeat. And some of those are like certain documents were built at one point and other stuff was developed.
Yeah, no, I'm a master of out-of-date documents as well.
Other questions on this
questions?
piece?
And again, we're happy to have, this is more to inform other conversations, I think, and to have a resource for you as we're going. Just wanted to make sure that you had that tool.
Thank you for this.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Now we put you on deputy superintendent's report.
Yes. That would be on the sheet. Oh, actually, yes, that would be good. I asked Brian, we had a conversation about, there was a sheet that he had supplied the other day about budget requests, and I asked if he could just take a minute. I think the sheet had gone out last meeting.
Yeah, I gave it out the last meeting, but I didn't get a chance to spend a lot of time on it, so I just wanted to briefly go over it, because I just didn't think it's fair just to dump it on you and not at least explain it. So what this is what used to be the green sheets in the yearbook a couple of years ago. They disappeared, I guess, about just before I got here. Basically what this is looking at all the positions that were requested. And the ones in green are the ones that are actually in the proposed budget. So you'll see at the top, you have the Assistant Director of Pupil Services. You have your behavior program teacher, the RISE program at the middle school. But these are positions that, as we went through the budget process, we didn't feel they would find their way into the proposed budget. And some of these were engineering design position, half of an ESL teacher, additional first grade teacher at Dondero, a case manager at Little Harbor, another case manager at Dondero, and a media production instructor for the CTE program. So at the bottom is the total net change request. So we're actually at 843,739 that we were requested. You see the only two we put in were about 270,000 of positions. So of the 843, only 270 made it in. 7.5 requested positions. We only put 2 into the proposed budget so far.
And we still net out negative 4.5 FTEs, even with the inclusion of those two roles.
It would be helpful maybe to have those in here as well, or some sort of way of understanding what those positions.
The reduced
Yeah.
FTE positions, we can definitely do that, had that similar request earlier today. And we can definitely create a similar summary sheet, we can probably bring back next meeting. That we just lay out, here are the positions that are going away to help make this work. We'll also have for you coming up we had talked about continuing service budget that fits better the definition of where the city was, and that we had kind of jumped the gun a little bit. I think you guys had talked, I mean, I think about it as being in a math class where people are like, show your work. And so Brian ran through an exercise to scope out what that looked like to roll everything across, which I think was what the manager and the deputy city manager for finance had talked about. In that rolling process, if we basically just continued what we were doing, right now we're at 4.48. Is that correct? I think up from the previous year, and it was a 6.13 if we had just rolled everything over. And so it's about, I think the delta in that is around 1.1 million in terms of the roll and not moving that direction.
Does the 6.13 include the these two positions, the RISE and no?
No, so there would have been no changes. Everybody just rolls. We don't do anything new. We don't net anything out. But we'll bring back, we will bring back for the next, we'll be able to kind of quickly show those nets and then what that difference looks like in that exercise. But to give you that idea, I think it's important to know this is starting, based on what the city conversation was, 1.1 under what show us what a continuing service budget would be.
So Steve and then Pip.
So, because since the continuing service is a 6-point increase.
Yep.
But but I believe this proposal at 4.5 was called the continuing service. Will we change that name?
Yes. So we're just going to call it our initial proposal. So we will not be referring to it, because I think the definition that what we tried to do is we tried to be responsive to what we're going to face and what we think we can get through this process and eventually get approved. At the same time, make some changes and adjustments where we can be. Our hope is to be have different services that are still at least on par with the services that we have. That's the goal. And so we'll bring back those positions that are lost as multiple retirements we don't fill, some other spots, but we'll bring those back and make sure that those are clear in the same type of way, that this is the stuff that was coming off the table in order to create what we have. It's all stuff that's in your binder, but we can bring it back in and easier to understand way.
I was wondering if we might want to address the question raised by the member of the public about the actuals versus the budget. I had that same thought when I looked at the binder initially, that it is hard to compare it's hard to look at just two budgets without knowing what was actually spent. So I understand we tend to stay close to our budgets, but is there any way or place where we can build in that actual category so we can see?
Yeah, it'll be a lengthy report, but I'm more than happy to.
So
Can we-
I assume it'd
yeah.
be similar to the binder you already gave us, but.
Different,
I mean, what we could do is, and this would be, I mean, when we're sitting with department heads and going through conversations, we're looking at multiple years of actuals. So, but that's like, which is, the lengthy report is not necessarily, well, somewhat lengthy and somewhat just long, the sheets that we work off of. So, so that would put us in a position to have multiple years of actuals, with the proposed, so you can kind of get a comparison. Because some of what we look at sometimes is we're looking at very similar to what we're talking about. It's like, what are we actually spending in actual lines over years? And then how are we moving things around to reflect what we're actually doing?
Yeah, so you're doing that already. You're just not presenting it to us that way, is what you're saying.
Yeah, but I think it's something we're gonna figure out how to structure it. We'll take a look at the Dover example or whatever, but that's part of our process. When we sit down with department heads and they start throwing these types of requests at us, and we're looking at, it's on the big, A4 sheets, and we're working our way through multiple years. So
Yeah, well, maybe what would be most helpful is just areas where the spending hasn't been really close to the budgeted amount. That would be good to know for us.
Byron?
Yeah, I guess like related to that, because I was looking through I was focusing on the operations in the elementary schools, and something that jumped out to me, and this was something that the actuals would be really helpful for, was this so the operating budget at Don Darrow was a 48% increase from last year to this year. At the other elementary schools, it was more flat, but I did the percentage, but it wasn't 48%. I assume that there's some actual spending happening at Don Darrow that would drive that kind of a change. And that's the kind of question I was going to ask about that, but the actuals would definitely illuminate that.
Right.
And be really helpful in that regard. Yeah.
Just kind of pulling on a similar thread on the multi-year actuals that you're talking about.
Yeah.
One of the things that can help frame, and I think I've mentioned this before, frame up our conversation is just the trend of the FTEs that we've had over the years. And again, I know it's not like an exact science, but something around -10 last year, and something around -4 this year.
Right.
So, and having the backdrop be, we expect flat, enrollment.
Yeah.
So I want to be able to paint that picture of like, yes, since we have made these, synergies, whatever you want to call it, and show that trend. And oh, by the way, I think we're at where we need to be in order to have the services that we want for our kids. So
it's we were having this conversation today. Brian and I were talking about it, about trying to create what's our ability to recreate when we stop for a second and say, one of the things that's been interesting is in part of this process at the board level, and then at the city process, the folks we were talking about in the organizational chart who are alternative funding,
right,
have been like, they're invisible. And so whether they come or they go, those numbers don't necessarily appear in what has been for years, this board's conversation, and then at the city level, the city conversation. And so one of the things that Brian and I were talking about. My desire is, because I know we've talked a little bit about this, trying to show people that trend, is being able to go back. I'd love to be like FY19, like a couple of years before COVID. Where were we at? What happened over time? And then where are we at now? And be able to show that across not just the general fund. And I think we very quickly, as we were trying to build this, it's very easy for us to recreate what was happening in our JLA positions, what was happening in the general fund. And then Brian, was it 207? 207? No.
206, 207 and operating fund.
But what we don't have right now, which we're working to try to recreate because there's not good longitudinal data connected to it, is what was happening during the same period of time in Title I and IDEA and these other places. We're trying to recreate that stuff because the documents that that are part of this process and the city process don't have those things. So we're trying to rebuild it in a way that with numbers that we're very confident in.
So those change a lot because, you know, if you have.
There's also some fluidity.
There's more fluidity where people are coming in, people are going out, you know, they hire a tutor or something like that. But it never shows up on the books because it's not paid for by the city, it's paid for by the grant.
Feds, whoever.
But at the same time, I think, whatever squishiness is there, I think there's something you can cull out of there.
Yeah,
Sure.
and we were talking about a couple different sets of numbers today, but I was like, I want to be able to point to a source that we're confident in. Because what I don't want to have is we're 85% confident in this 7-year data trend, but then people poke at it and it's like, oh, well, that's not really accurate because of such and such. And now the whole thing has no credibility.
Yep.
And so that
Even
one's.
if we can do that for the part that is the taxpayer funded budget, even if we're not as sure as of the grant funded pieces that show
Sure.
from year to year, I think that's
Yeah,
valuable.
that's valuable too.
But also, I mean, there has been lower funding, right,
Mhm.
over the years. So that would actually paint a better picture in terms of the actual amount of people in the building doing services for people. So I think that's I'm believing that that's it's gonna show. That there's been a pretty decent drop, especially since 2019.
Yep. Yeah. And I think one other thing that we talked about too is what it was, those who've been on the board for a while, you've gone through the process for multiple cycles where you feel like we're at that last meeting and it's like, what are the things we're cutting in order to get to the next step? It is also true though, that we will, in any given year, we will have one set thing in the budget. Then we might hire a couple paras during the year. So you might add 2 FTEs because you've hired 2 paras that based on IEPs we needed to hire. So it'll be interesting. So I think that's why I want to make sure we have apples to apples numbers that are not just based on proposal or accepted proposals, but are the actuals. And not just us, but the whole kind of operation has a weird way of tracking those things, and then we have to go scour places to get that information and make sure it's accurate. So, but we're working on it.
Nancy?
Yes, I have two questions. The green sheet that you put up there, are those requests from principals?
That was cost center leaders. I think there was at least one. There were some things that were asked but not formally asked. So there's some that don't appear up there. There was like another CTE position. There was, I'm trying to think of what else, but for the most part, this came from principals, department heads. So I think the nursing department head had a request that was up in there. A lot of them were principals or the special ed director, but multiple principals requesting additional help in special education. That was a common theme throughout this, was different areas where we were looking to add in special ed.
So can we have a copy of that? Are you gonna let us have a copy? Oh, was that?
So that you previously got,
Okay,
but we can
got it,
get you a new
yeah.
copy if you'd like.
And my second question is, do we have a number from the city council yet?
So the city council has indicated so far that they are not interested in providing so far. So our understanding through the city manager is the desire is to see a continuing services budget, which we're saying is the 6.13% increase. But we have already jumped from that. I think what they had talked about was, show us if you didn't change anything, what would it cost? And we're like, well, we're planning to change things because we think it's just good management based on things that are happening around us. So we're already moving towards that, just short of 4.5%. But we want to make sure that we're answering the original request, which is to go back and say, if we didn't touch anything, we just let it roll on, we're over 6. So.
Thank you.
Yep. Well,
Other questions?
I guess just to follow what you just said. I'm curious how you get to that 4.48% with all those pending requests still. And the loss of 4 FTEs, like how you're saying that's good management. Is that good management because we're cutting costs or?
Yeah,
But
no,
we have requests that, like, we have our schools have needs, and it feels like we're not addressing those. In order to make.
yeah, I mean, I think we're always in this, that I think there's always a frustration with me, right? I never bring you back the whole list of what everybody asks and just say, give me what everybody asks for. There's always a certain calculus with me where I'm trying to determine what we can, well, number one, what we can get through. Number two, what we can get through with a high degree of confidence after we get through you guys, so that we're in a situation where we can start hiring in March for the positions that we need, and we're not in a spot where we're hesitating until the first week of June for the council to finish their process. So I think that's part of it. And there's other times where we don't necessarily agree that there's a strong enough need at the moment for a particular role, so almost always, I mean, our folks are bringing things that are like, that would be nice for us to do. And then we're trying to make decisions about what are the trade-offs in order to do the 2 things I just said. So.
Well, I mean, I appreciate your ability to navigate that, because it's a difficult dynamic to make some choices that need to be made. I think as a board, having the information is really helpful.
Yeah.
To, first of all, to know what the asks are, but even to know maybe what the increase would be if we did.
Sure.
If we did accept all those requests.
Yeah.
And then compare that to the continuing services budget, that would be helpful. And I think it's helpful to present to the city too, so that they understand, those parameters. This is ideal. This is, somewhere in the middle, and then this is the lowest we can go.
Yeah, and I think the exercise we could do is just basically take the 6.13, tack on those additional positions and say, based on the request that we received from our folks, it would be 6.5 or whatever it's going to be.
I think that's what those green sheets that we all refer to used to do for us. And that, for me, that was really helpful, just to understand, like, to be able to make all the comparison across the board of what we're actually looking at losing or gaining.
Sure.
I look
How
back
much we
in
spend.
historically books, so just before I got here,
Yeah.
where those green sheets were used pretty steadily, and then a few years ago, they kind of morphed into a summary sheet, which is what I was using this year, which is like 8 or 9 pages, 10 pages of basically the same thing, but more of a narrative form. I don't know if that.
I think they were,
That
I
was a
think
good
they were
choice to
hand
change
delivered a
over?
lot, so maybe they weren't even in your records.
There were definitely handouts that we received that we got to add to the binder ourselves as we went through the process, because a question might come up, like, there's this job that's like 3 down on the list that we want to talk about. And just as a thought experiment, if we wanted to put that role into the budget, how would that change the percentage increase that we were asking for? I think that's what you're
And
talking
they were
about.
pretty colors too.
They were pretty colors.
They weren't always green.
And they were
changed
also
color.
just very simple
Right.
to read and simple to
I
explain.
will say I dug out a book from about 4 years ago when I was doing some research, and it was a lot thicker than what this one is.
Yes.
So I don't know how you guys went through it all
Ripping it
and processed it, but it was a lot of, even a lot for me. But
There.
I think it might have just been maybe Nathan pared it down over the years.
Tim, was that it? Or
Yes, thank you.
Steve? And then Byron, maybe?
Just a couple questions based upon this. Do we call this the green sheet now, or would you call it the green stripes?
Green line sheet,
Semi-green sheet?
semi green,
Whatever.
stone green, yeah.
The partial meeting.
Oh, last week.
Um,
Okay, that's fine.
So one of my questions is, there was a request for a first grade teacher at Dondero, and that just relates to making that, I'm still interested in knowing class sizes per grades.
And I want to let you know, with two data requests, one that we're working on that will allow an examination of kind of residency and enrollment based on redistricting spots. So I've got Mike Parr, who's our database coordinator, is working on that. And then I've got him, I think I got a draft today. Couple days ago.
There's a lot.
So we've got our version, and my request was I want to see every section connected to every teacher, and I want it in a digestible format. So I think I've got number one. I'm trying to figure out number two, and our goal is to bring that back. But we've had Mike working on that particular request for over a week, trying to put that together. And it's not exclusively what he's doing, but we heard you and we're working on it.
Great, thank you. Yeah, because I mean, if we had 20 kids or 30 kids per class at one school and 10 at the other, then I can't imagine there's that differential, but we'd want to know.
Right.
And then the other related to, you have two requests for case manager, and just in terms of we're adding the assistant director, and just making sure that we explain why it's more important that we have that position than these positions. I think it's just critical.
And I think we're gonna Dan Alexander, the director's coming back.
Yeah.
And then part of that, we've got some conversation about kind of vision for the future, and then how this position fits into that with some numbers connected to it.
Cool. So thank you.
Byron?
So on a similar thread, I had like an initial draft of some of those like class numbers for the different elementary schools. And I tried to cross-reference that with what's in the teacher line items. And the one I couldn't reconcile was for Little Harbor. And because they have 20 classrooms, but there are 21 positions listed in the teacher salaries, and two of them, the grade are INT, and I just didn't, there's one, the fourth grade classroom, which isn't filled in at all. So I don't know, my assumption was maybe one of the INTs, whatever that means, interventionist. Okay, so it wasn't clear. So that's interesting. So they're in Little Harbor as interventionists, but I didn't see them else like in the other elementary schools that way.
Yeah, this is a nomenclature thing.
Okay.
We're naming things differently in different buildings.
So, but would that fall under like special education or like?
No, it's regular education. They provide support for tier 2 instructing students who might need a second dose of instruction,
Okay.
whether in ELA or in math.
Okay, so I guess.
So an important thing in that is those folks are not subject matter specific per se. So they're not literacy specialists. So literacy folks appear in a different tab. Those folks are general interventionists.
And they share a space. So that's how you're not getting the classrooms per people.
Right. I guess it's interesting that the other elementary schools don't have those positions.
They do.
They're not.
They're in different formats. So
Okay.
Title I will pay for some of the people in those types of roles. So it's not going to appear as general fund.
But what I'm hearing is, though, it'd be good to be able to see what are the different types of non-special education intervention models that are happening at the different buildings, and how are they similar and how are they different?
I think Pip just said it's difficult to compare.
Yeah.
So it'd be nice to know, I guess, apples to apples in terms of like those types of positions across the elementary schools.
And I think one of the ways to do that, not from the binder, is from the chart, because it's what you'll see is those folks appear under, if they're not special education, it's typically support services, I think, in each building. And then you can see who's this bucket of these other folks that are doing some form of intervention work. that would be the way, the easiest way to see apples to apples. This is where the spreadsheet is less helpful than the visualization, I think.
Yep.
So is that green line filled? Is there somebody there?
That was somebody that was moved to a different cost center.
Okay,
We're not sure what we're doing with that position yet.
but we're still having 20 classrooms. I mean, there's 20 classrooms there now. I assume they're filled with kids, yeah, so.
It
okay.
was moved to a different cost center because it was moved to a different position or?
Uh,
There be another reason?
I believe, if memory serves me correct, it was because they were, I believe they made them moving under reading, because they were reading.
Intervention. No.
I agree with Byron. I think it would be helpful just for us to understand, because we get a lot of questions about what types of support that we're providing to students.
Yeah.
And so even independent of the budget, just to understand.
No, I think I think
And I'm-
that,
like the middle school, for example, it's laid out differently.
so,
And I know that's
yeah, in the
different
middle
from
school,
being specialized by
everybody's,
subject.
everybody's teamed.
Right,
So,
but
we
that
could
makes sense to
do,
me.
we could do a quick, when we have everybody here on the third, we might be able to quickly go through that with each of the people here to talk through. But yes, the middle school, you'll see the middle school people are, we gave some leeway to principals about how they wanted to group people.
Right.
And so at the middle school, you have people listed as resource who are connected with a team. So you have an embedded special educator with a team. And so due to the organization, the middle school is so team kind of rooted, the decision in terms of the org chart was to put those people with the team. So it's not the same as what we're doing in some other spaces. So I understand why that's confusing. But I think when we have an ensemble cast coming at our next meeting, and it might be an opportunity, we might be able to, in just a couple minutes, very quickly clarify how that looks across each.
We also had a question, I think, at our first budget meeting this year about what was going to provide support to all the kids that we keep in the district, because that's
Right.
most of them.
Yep, yep.
Okay. Nancy, you have a question?
I don't-
Are you
I-
done? I'm sorry.
Oh.
Sorry. Go ahead.
I missed the meeting last week, but I know I had asked that, is it possible for us to find out the out of district placements? I mean, are 5 of them court ordered? 5 of them because of some other reason, are 5 of them, is it possible for us to understand why we have so much out of district?
We're having a lot of conversations, and I think there's a desire, we've had a lot of conversations over the last 2 weeks about how to, and I think this is, and it pulls at attention that when Esther spoke tonight about privacy of students, it speaks to attention of the desire to give students privacy as they are, dealing with a disability, that they should have privacy around that and the services that we provide. Simultaneously, we've talked about the fact that you have this cost area that was a big discussion point last year. And so then as a elected board, and one of your primary responsibilities is to have oversight over spending, how do we not make this area where there's a bunch of spending that's increasing a black box where, so it's like we're trying to balance those two things. So some of what we've been having is talking about things in even more detail. And I think Esther's point, which is like, well, I'm already uncomfortable with what you're doing already. And so we're trying to figure out just that right space to give you more information, to make quality decisions about what we're doing about programming and spending, and simultaneously being protective of students' privacy rights. And we've been talking to different attorneys. We've been talking to the School Boards Association, where we continue to try to find just the land.
It would just be helpful if the community could understand why our out of district placement cost was so high.
Yeah.
I mean, it would just be, I think it would make everybody feel more comfortable about.
I think, at the last meeting, when Director Alexander was here, I think he talked about the fact that, or maybe it was one of our meetings this week, is that probably what's more important than discussing kids who are currently in placements. It's more about what does the future look like? Now you depersonalize those particular students who are out of district, and more talk about, well, what are we doing going forward? Not, not just to be more efficient in spending, but to ethically serve our kids in our space, in our district. What does that look like? And I think his desire is to stay away from moving in a direction that could provide more, when someone sits down and could say, well, I think I can identify some kids already. And moving instead towards what are we doing as we move forward to have more kids in districts in a more efficient way, but in a better way that serves kids.
So I think Nathan and then Jen.
Yeah, I just had one question. I apologize because I wasn't able to make it to the, special ed specific budget meeting. But the one question I had was, I was under the impression that we were allowed to ask what school do these students go to? And I don't want this to become like a confidentiality, conversation either. So if that's not the case, that's fine. But more or less, that was going to be, if I was there, my questions. And
so no, right. I mean, so if you said how many students at the high school go to, the Smith School in whatever place, then the answer would be no. Because then we get really, really specific, and then easily identifiable. So, yeah, but that's a rub.
But I think what we were looking at is, can we go over a decade and be like over 10 years? So it's a larger number of kids. We've gone to X schools over time. So we're not saying that there's 2 kids at the high school who are going to this specific place and then we all know who they are.
And I think that's exactly what we'd all be.
Can we say broadly
is providing
going to these places? Yeah. But it's the trick is getting that back in time far enough that it's a big enough number of students that we're not identifying the kids.
How do we,
I think that's been a big ask for Dan to try to go back through and figure that.
Yeah. How do we aggregate, at a level that still shows trend? Exactly. So you can be like, well, it seems like a lot of kids who are doing this, maybe we need to do more of that, at the same time, when we were having some of these conversations in the past week, I think Patty and I had both mentioned thinking about No Child Left Behind scoring. And when you got test scores back, the N, so you have all these different categories of students and you want to make sure that you're doing well in all these different categories. Could be by gender, could be by race. And you, even as a district, you wouldn't get back a readout on kids that had an N, so a number of students that was less than 11. And it was like, you can't see it, you get an asterisk. And it's just like, even you as a district, we're not going to give you these numbers because it's too potentially identifiable. And that could be about gender, race, age, whatever, but within a certain category. And it's not even, and I think we have a higher degree of ethical obligation to provide privacy to students with disabilities. So we're working on it. We're trying to find.
Question.
Yep.
I think Jen?
Yeah. I'm assuming that when the school engages in litigation, those fees come out of our budget, or do they come from somewhere else?
So we pay, so it depends. So the fees that are associated with the lawyer time depends. Some of that is going to come, so if we're working with outside attorneys, then we're paying fees to an outside attorney to help represent us.
We as in the school.
We, the school.
Okay.
Yeah. So for example, in cases, if our outside attorney that we most often use is Wadley, Starr and Peters out of Manchester. If we use Wadley, then we receive a bill. We don't exclusively use Wadley for special education, but we do receive a bill for all the different types of services we request of them. If we use in-house legal counsel from the city, then we're not billed for that per se.
At all?
We don't have a separate billing. No, it's just like so if we're utilizing those services, it's just whatever they're paying whatever the municipal side of the house is paying those attorney, whatever the salaries are, that's what they make. We don't get billed out separately for that. Now, part of what happens with Wadley is that we had a retirement in the legal department a few years ago. And we had gone to the legal department because we knew they were losing the expertise of somebody who had been in special ed law for a while. And that's when we said, why don't we contract out to Wadley. We think we can do it at a figure that's cheaper than you going out and trying to find a person. And so we don't, and then we pay them per service.
Okay, where do I find that budget item?
So
Scour
legal
the budget.
fees.
But what tab? There's central office, I mean.
But and then where legal fees are, is not gonna be broken out by special education.
Right.
So you'd see an amount that's budgeted to cover all of our legal fees. Not
Is there a way to, so we
exclusively
could
special.
see how much it was for special education?
Trying to think about how, I think we could, I think we can work on what that would look like. What I don't know is is how, and I should know, but Brian, if we come to a settlement agreement with a family that leads to us, let's say, paying tuition, something along those lines, where that wouldn't necessarily appear I'm trying to think about how it would
If we were paying tuition,
out of tuition.
But not the litigation up until that point.
Litigation up until that point.
Like, if there's a dispute over placement and the family, and then there's a court.
So we would, I mean, we have we have bills. And we could have a conversation about, like, in the past year, what we paid for bills connected to.
I was just curious if it was somewhere in here. You said it was.
Page 91,
Thank you.
second one from the.
Just a lump.
But it's just a lump, so I guess
It's a lump.
we have
You're not gonna get more.
it broken down.
I think if we were gonna do that, it would be really helpful to go back a few years and get sort of like,
Yeah.
because.
Yeah, and we would only be able
you
to,
run average over.
we would only be able to look at,
2
in terms
years.
of that, we'd be able to look at 2 years because of
Because
what we
this
have
is
with
year
Wadley.
3, right?
Before that, what you could do is you would point to, here was a staff attorney that was a part-time attorney. Here's what the city paid that part-time attorney.
Right.
Some of that time was for the school district
I see,
and
so we
special
could,
education, some of
Yeah.
it wasn't. So the most we'd be able to look at is like a 2-year snapshot.
2
from when we
years,
brought,
this is year 3.
when we brought Wadley on. So.
And the legal fees also cover things like policy, when they consult with us with policy, when we're looking at other situations, those seminars, there's a lot more to the legal
And
line.
well, I do think it would, I mean, I think it would be helpful to break it out into the legal litigation around special ed specifically, because that is a number that should be thought of as part of our special ed costs, I think.
well, I mean, definitely,
Sounds like it
Yeah.
might be hard to do.
no, I mean, we can do it and we can spend some time putting together, this is what that figure looks like.
Questions? Steve?
Just a quick question. Just on positions, I was noticing that, if I'm reading it correctly, that there's, 2 counselors at New Franklin and Little Harbor and 1 counselor at Dondero. I just was curious why I don't know. I was wondering about that.
So we have, at the Dare, we have an interesting, it's a team of 2, but one is a paraeducator who's exclusively assigned to counseling, to work with the counselor, and to carry out some of those roles. And actually, she's also in the midst of an internship, to get her MSW, I
Yep.
believe. So we're also working with her around that. Now, what happens, whether long-term we're moving to a different model or not, don't know, but it hasn't been a request of the principal to move off of the 1 counselor and 1 special educator assigned to assist in those duties.
Other questions? Dare we move on to? Superintendent, I believe. Okay.
All right, so you have, the overnight, we talked about this before, overnight field trips, just notification of, upcoming overnight field trips, that have already been approved, and will be occurring. The school board, city council joint session. So we're still working on what that is going to look like. Had some conversation with the city manager today. I do think that what we anticipated the request is going to flow back to a conversation we had during the CIP work from one of the counselors that led to the request, which is wanting a fuller conversation with the schools around basically CIP development. What's happening with buildings? What is our plan? How do we develop those plans? What does that look like? So it's going to be what I anticipate at this point, and I've communicated this to city staff, is Kenny is back to do the Kenny show again, but then with an expansion towards two things. Stretching out a few more years further than the 5-year window that he gave us. Talking a little bit, I think one of the conversations I had today was, well, what's the process by which CIP requests are developed in the school department, and what does that look like, and how does that work? And it was, is it similar to how is it similar or dissimilar from how city projects, the municipal side of the house, are? Some of this is coming out of the change in what the New Franklin project had been, and then our requests for additional funds. And so there's this question of, basically, are there more surprise increased requests coming from the schools? I think it's basically kind of at the core. And so the conversation, I think you all know this, we'll have this conversation again when we meet with the city council. That was a one-off change that came at New Franklin. It was a result of the work that we did during redistricting, result of people touring schools and going through New Franklin and having New Franklin parents visit other schools and come to the conclusion, this is qualitatively a different space than what my kid is in. And how do we feel about that as a community? How do we feel about that as a board? And then how we went back to, as a result of that, we went back to the folks that we were engaged in around the renovation. And I had requested, which I said, show me what qualitatively the same space as Dundero looks like in that footprint. And if you're going to change the plans from the plans that had been developed in 2019, what do those plans look like? And they came back with a plan that then we brought back and shared with you. You ultimately agreed with. We brought to the city for them to take a look at. They ultimately agreed with through their CIP process. But that was a pretty unusual situation that was directly connected to, I think, a community. I think we're being responsive to where our community was at. And it's not something I anticipate would be similar in the future. But we can have that conversation with city council at the joint session. And Kenny can talk through how does Kenny, because a lot of it is Kenny, how does Kenny developing plans over time? And there's not a lot of magic to it. Very often it's like, what is the lifespan of the building? What is the lifespan of the systems? And how are we building out over years, thoughtfully anticipating when things are going to go offline and we're ready to pick up those things. So, but that's my understanding today. We do have an organizational meeting connected to this on Monday, the 2nd. I'll be sitting, Kenny and I, and Brian here after that, and Brian, we'll see. But on the 2nd, a few of us are together, and Patty, you might be part of it, but we'll see. On the 2nd, we have a meeting with some folks on the city side just to hammer out the final details.
And Lee has his hand up.
Lee?
Yeah, sorry, I just want to ask a question, both from a budget perspective, but also because of the two topics about special education, but also facilities. One of the things that I want to bring up and don't know where I can find it in the budget is money that's been set aside to ensure that the facilities are ADA compliant. And one of the reasons I'll bring to your attention, which is the fact that we still have kids like mine that are being actually changed on bathroom floors on yoga mats, and that's just not acceptable.
So there wouldn't be an independent line, but we can clarify with Kenny what the line is where that would be utilized in order to take care of that concern. But there's not like an ADA compliance line in what you're going to see in facilities.
Okay, so how do we monitor that then as a board?
Well, I think then I think there's a fuller, I think in terms of ADA compliance, I guess, Lily, I'm trying to respond in the moment to something I was not fully aware of in connection to your child. And
Well, that's just one example, and you and I have had conversations about this stuff in the past, but
I understand, but I want to make sure in terms of just ADA compliance and how we are approaching from a facility standpoint, making sure that we are ADA compliant in any of the work that we're doing. I think Kenny can speak to that. Because I think it is typically thoughtfully part of his process in terms of how we're going about the design and implementation of building projects. But I can't speak to that specific instance that you were mentioning and how that at the moment.
not expecting you to. Not expecting you to.
Yep.
Can I jump in for just a second? Yeah, sorry, but I just wanted to respond to this because some of this, I know we have addressed with Kenny through the policy committee some issues that were specific to our faculty, but I wonder if it's something that the policy committee should look into. The ADA compliance.
Well, ADA is
that-
law, so I mean, I think whether or not we're following the law in particular projects. I think we can come back with, I think we can broadly come back with some type of report. Again, this is all, we're loading up a lot of stuff for the next 2 weeks, but we can broadly come back with, here's our approach to ADA compliance. Here's where we think we are. I think what we're gonna end up saying is based on the expectations, I would assume, that based on the expectations to us from the state, when we develop things, as we reach new issues, that we're not out of compliance, but we're always moving towards, when we do new things, what's the next, how do we become more? You know what I mean? I guess I'm not articulating it well,
Yeah.
but I think if I brought Kenny in and I'd say, are we ADA compliant? I think he's gonna say, we are, based on the expectations of, that we coming to us from the entities that oversee us. At the same time, I hear what the concern is, and there's things that we need to do then in order to address those types of concerns.
It seems like it would be fair when we talk through the committees to look at that probably would fall
It's like
either
facilities.
facilities.
Yeah.
Facilities.
Yeah,
Or-
maybe that's a good place to do it.
The board about where we're expecting that.
Yeah.
To be reported
that makes
out.
Right, because I think Lee's question was who monitors that?
Exactly.
And
Right.
so
So we should maybe just
somebody should,
make sure when we have the committee
Yeah,
discussion,
that's a
that we're
good-
sure which one that fits under.
because I don't think he was just referring to new projects, but it sounds like.
Nope. I'm not.
Nope. Did I miss another hand over here? No?
Can you just tell me what time that meeting is on Thursday and where it's here, I assume? What time? Do we know?
It is. I don't know if we know. Usually they do a work session at 6.
I know.
For the.
Is it on the calendar already?
On my
It is.
calendar.
It is.
Yeah.
For 6 o'clock?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay.
Any other questions on the superintendent's report before we let Zach get to the last thing on here?
Oh, no, go ahead. I was gonna say Student Government Day.
Government Day.
Yeah.
That's my favorite part.
Not seeing any. So I just want to make sure people are aware. I think people have been on the board. This is something that was a tradition for a long time in Portsmouth and then went away. And then Councilor Blaylock really led the charge to bring it back. The culminating experience of Student Government Day is students. Right now, the culminating experiences have been students hold a mock city council meeting, but in the lead up to that, they do a bunch of other things to understand better what's happening within the city, what's happening within the schools, So part of that is around shadowing of folks. So I wanted to make sure you had kind of the dates. Ooh, I got my dates get into my letterhead a little bit. Apologize for that. But March 19th in the letterhead, at least on my screen, is the culminating event. And on that day, students who are part of the program will have an opportunity to shadow some folks around the district. I need to get back to around the district and the city. So, I've had students every year. I've had students with me. Patty, have you had students with
every year,
you? Business administrator, principals, other people, athletic director have had students shadow them. Anybody, did you have a shadow? You guys had shadows last year, right?
Well, we went to the meet,
We had a good time. We had a conversation.
I know you guys had a
bunch
great-
of students about student policy issues like the dress code and graduation requirements. And they had some serious feedback that was really smart.
Yeah.
So I think if people have time that day, it's a lot of fun.
that's the 19th, correct?
Yep.
And typically
Okay.
that shadowing portion is in the morning, so you got some time, so, and I think and I'll let you guys speak to this, because on my end of the show, sometimes I'm bringing them to meetings.
Yep.
Sometimes we're just sitting down and
Yep.
talking for a half an hour about some of the things that they have questions about. What goes into a snow day, why can't we have another, why aren't you funding this other team we'd like you to fund? Those types of things. And then there's lunch together. If you have the ability to stay through the whole thing, you don't have to do the whole thing. There's a lunch together with the students and the staff, and then they roll into this mock meeting opportunity. Certain people at the table have been part of said mock sessions before, and may or may not have pushed certain school board agenda items. I feel part of the sessions.
It's certainly been a
And
avenue for change.
so, and the 10th is a new element, though, around students potentially doing a mock school board meeting.
No, I think they just
Yeah, they come
shadow.
to
Oh, I'm sorry. They shadow. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I apologize.
Somebody-
So we'll have students here on that night. And usually you'll have somebody, if you remember, you'll have a student sitting near you, behind you, and they're here for a while. And if we go really long, then we eventually give them the boot and let them.
Yes.
But anyways, I just want to make sure you had these dates on your calendar. I will say that it's our students, and I would say that the council has done a really good job of having a high level of participation in the past.
Yes.
So I'm always, not that we're in a competition, but
We are.
No, we are. Yeah. So I'd love, the as much participation as we can have would be great. And I think it's really meaningful for students.
I would love to get as many people as we can on the 19th from 8:30 to about 1 who can really sit with kids, especially if we can get representatives from different committees that the board has.
Yeah.
You can absolutely bring to the students. These are the things that we're going to be chewing on over the next year. We can hand it out ahead of time, and then they have the opportunity to really give us some pretty smart feedback.
Yeah.
So it's actually a good way for us to learn as
Yeah,
much as it is for
absolutely.
the students. We probably learn more from them. So if anyone's interested, send us an email or I'll just recruit you.
The February 7th. What is that and where is that?
So it's at the high school in the Nietzschean Theater. It's just so happens that all the students and student council are meeting that morning. And it's an
Okay.
agenda item for that meeting.
And they
to talk about
they
that.
want city council and school.
Right,
board
they don't
members to be
need
there.
all the persons involved, but certain representatives, and
Okay.
I'd say someone from the school board to be there would be.
Yeah, it'd be great. I mean, usually it's, typically it's been the city manager's there,
City manager.
maybe a counselor or two.
I think I
And I'm
remember
usually
too.
sitting in the back, throwing in my 32 cents. And that's what it's been in the past. So now that is not a long, right? It's pretty short. They're there
You guys
for
would be there for me.
10 minutes.
Yeah.
10 minutes, and it's very quickly like, here's what it is. It's a little bit of like, it's not a long, like, here's who we are. It's quickly like, I'm the city manager, and this is so-and-so, and this is so-and-so. And we're really excited about the day. Here's how it works. Usually city clerk has been in attendance in the past. And it's real quick, with the student reps.
9 o'clock. I mean, that I can go to. These other ones, plan that stuff.
I know it's hard. I know it's hard. I know it's hard. So maybe that, yeah, maybe the quick, you can be
Yeah.
our cameo on
That'll be
Saturday.
your Saturday morning.
It also, it's also good to be like,
Her calendar
I
too.
can go.
it's also pretty cool to be when you go and you're like, oh, right, students are meeting with advisors
Yeah.
on Saturdays
Yeah.
to carry out some of these functions. It's also kind of cool to be part of that too.
Right, thank you. And thank you.
Of course. See you there.
It's on my calendar.
Moving on to
No, that's okay.
correspondence.
Yep, no action needed on this one, just a notification. So Shauna Comerford, who has been on leave, was on maternity and has decided not to return from maternity, has given us the heads up that she will not be coming back for the fall of 2026. So we wish her the best and thank her for all of her service to the district.
Thank you. Ryan, administrator report.
It's in your agenda, you'll see the December expense and revenue. Not much to report again, as for we are kind of hitting straight down the green on our expenses this year. Right now, even though January is technically the 7th month of the fiscal year, it really is mid-year for the school year. So we don't really do a deep dive until after January is done. So within the next month or so, we'll do a deep dive to see if anything's out of alignment or not. Right now, again, everything looks pretty good. We just received revenue, which in January for our SAU 50, which will be reflected in the next report you see, which I should have February 10th
Yeah.
meeting. It's a regular meeting, so I'm gonna have it ready for you on the 10th. But otherwise, everything's good.
Any questions there?
questions?
Steve?
Can you explain, you've got a few items down the list that are in red?
Yep.
Can you explain why those are and what that means when they're in red?
It just means we've overspent that cost center, but we operate on a bottom line budget.
Right.
So right now, we're showing that we're 6 million in the black. Basically, what that means is we encumber as much as we can each year. And that what I mean by that is, for example, our electric bills. We will encumber everything I budgeted for electric out of the gate day one, because I want to make sure that money never gets spent on anything else. So nobody thinks that they have more money. Same thing with salaries. Salaries are encumbered. FICA's encumbered. Retirement's encumbered. A lot of things that we were encumbered. So as we get closer to the end of the year, we don't spend all that money. Now we start releasing those encumbrances and closing out POs. And all of a sudden money starts showing up at the end of the year. We usually have some balance at the end. This past year we didn't have any, but I mean, we actually where we should be at this point in the year.
So for example, like in 104 Little Harbor, we were up, we're in the red 45 grand.
That could be
It's highly likely that once we square up, reconcile everything at the end of the year, that won't be where we are.
But a lot of times what happens too is, and it happens with people more, is you'll have one person that you budgeted for last year, that person leaves, you replace them. The number that's budgeted is not the same as what they're getting paid. It could be higher, it could be lower. So you're either gonna have an extra money, or you're gonna have too much money that you spend, but usually making it up on a different line.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so
Nancy?
how come the 153 special ed secondary, why is that so?
Because everything is encumbered in there, or we've either put people in there. We move people into that cost center from other cost centers in order to provide the services we need. Other parts of it are sometimes what happens is as we switch from year to year, and we do this again in the mid-year dive, is somebody who was moved from one cost center to another. They moved them on the books, but they didn't move them in payroll. So payroll is encumbering them in their old cost center and not the correct cost center. So once I usually move those people around, it tends to even itself out.
Can you give an example, just because I'm feeling a little dense tonight, about how would you move someone from one cost center? Is there an example of a typical position that might move in the middle of the year?
We have at the elementary a lot where
Sorry.
teachers will move from building to building.
Ah, okay, so if they were first grade and they got moved
Yeah,
to
we
first
go from
grade.
Don Darrow to
Gotcha.
Little Harbor.
Okay,
That happens a lot and it just doesn't catch up with payroll. Payroll has them still at Little Harbor. We filled that position at Little Harbor. Now Little Harbor is showing one more teacher than they should, which is taking more money out of the budget. So we usually rectify that about halfway through the year.
thank you. Other questions on this? All right. We will move on to old business and you are back on deck for a quick update on the principal search.
So, yeah, so we're, today, if it wasn't for Mother Nature, so we've gone through the process. I think I laid out for the board a while ago, process we're going on. We appointed a committee, we surveyed all folks all over the district. We developed a profile of the candidate. We worked with NESDEC to then take that profile and turn it into an ad to push out to everywhere. We've got a number of people who applied. I'm trying to remember the number. Do you remember, Lisa? Total 17, right? 17 applicants. The committee narrowed down to folks to interview, initial decision about some interviewing, to 5. We were going to interview 2 today and then, 2 feet of snow came. So we decided, we got together yesterday afternoon. I reached out to those 2 candidates and let them know that I wasn't sure what was going to happen in the morning. I thought that the wisest move was for us to reschedule, just because we weren't going to know what we were going to be doing. So I think we already completed the rescheduling. Did you guys get notifications already? All right, we reached back out to those candidates and we'll be interviewing those 2 next week. And we have 3 that we're interviewing on Thursday. Based on that, then we'll have some deliberation and then we'll make a determination whether we want to interview more folks or whether we want to move some folks, some of those 5 to finalists, where we would start looking at visits both to the district and out to their schools. So that's where we're at the moment. A little bit off the pace because my push has been trying to, my ideal was contract in hand by March 1. We're a little off that pace right now, but not a ton. So we can continue to push along, and I'm bummed that we didn't have the opportunity to talk to some of those candidates this morning. So that's where we're at.
Thank you. Next up, consideration and approval of policy for second reading. Yep.
Okay, well, first, thank you to Byron and anyone else who helped with the policies last time that I was not here suddenly. And it looks like you all passed the first reading of IFK on that one, that date, so that's great. I guess I'll start by entertaining a motion to pass that one.
So moved.
Second.
Great, thank you. So this policy, as I think you probably know and remember, was another one where quite a few other things were combined to, other policies were combined to make this a more robust policy. And we will be looking at eliminating some of those other ones, but are there questions about this one as it is now?
No discussion. Ready for a roll call vote?
Yes. Jen Shum,
Yes.
Pip Clues. Yes. Stephen Adler,
Yes.
Byron Matto,
Yes.
Brian French.
Yes.
Lisa Rappaport,
Yes.
Nancy Claver.
Yes.
Fish Campbell,
Yes.
Lee Hudson,
Yes.
passed.
Okay, and then, as I mentioned, this one, that policy that has just passed incorporated several others. So we could consider eliminating all 3 of these as a block, I believe, or we could do them individually.
I'll move to eliminate policy IKFA, ILBAA, and IMBC.
Second.
Any discussion on that?
I will just say that as a policy committee, we did go back and review and make sure that we felt like all of these were covered in the new policy.
Seeing no questions, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Jen Shum,
Yes.
Pip Clues,
Yes.
Steve Adler,
Yes.
Byron Matto,
Yes.
Brian French,
Yes.
Lisa Rappaport,
Yes.
Nancy Claiberg.
Yes.
Tish Campbell.
Yes.
Lee Hudson.
Oh, Lee, you're muted. So
Oh,
you said,
sorry, yes. Thank you.
Well, thanks. That was
Thank you.
maybe the most efficient.
Record
visit
time.
I've ever had.
All right, I said it too soon. Moving now to new business, and I won't turn it back over
Right.
to you for discussion reporting. And
yeah, I just want to make sure the board was aware that we're working through, based on the Parents' Bill of Rights that came through, had some information around recording of students in classrooms and academic settings, audio and video recording. That then got interpreted by the Department of Education, interpreted it in a pretty strict way. And so it has thrown a real wrench in the works, and a lot of the work that's been done in focus area 2 up to this point, pretty much all of our work from the earliest stages was looking at video-based approaches to giving folks professional feedback, both from supervisor to teacher, colleague to colleague, and then even allowing staff members easy access to a platform that allow them to record themselves and give critical, self-reflection and that sort of thing. So we've worked really hard. We want it to be, and now this has really thrown a wrench in the works in terms of our ability to move forward. So we are, as a committee, we are rehuddling to try to strategize as to where we're going to go next and what this means. We are continuing to have dialogue with folks in the legal arena, because it has implications beyond just this, what we were thinking about. I mean, it's getting into things like video recording around testing. You have to test students academically in some situations. You need to video record. Depending on who you talk to, that may or may not be in compliance with current law now. We're having conversations later about the recording of athletic events. I think you saw something in the paper. There was a story in the paper about this, but we're sitting back down with city legal to have some conversations about, do we think that the stuff that we're doing now is in compliance, or are we going to need to pull back on the recording and live feed of athletic events? There is some conversation as to whether or not we will be able to broadcast graduation this year or not as a result of the statute. I think what's happening in Concord is people are like, oops, that wasn't what I meant to do. And now there's a scramble to kind of figure out how quickly people can change that because of the wide range of things that it's impacting. So we are continuing to work with legal folks on all those different issues. Some of those impacts are immediate, like the impact on focus area 2. Some of those are a little bit further down the road, but we'll keep you updated as we go. Just have an awareness that we will not be in a position to hit some of our timelines on focus area 2 now, because we have spent a lot of time going off in one direction that now we're impeded from. So just want to make sure you're aware, and we will come back, whether it's about focus area 2 or it's about just in general what's happening in relation to video recording, and keep you informed. So
Any questions?
does not impact, I was going to say, it does not impact still stuff. So you can still take photographs, still push out our some of our social media stuff can continue to happen, as long as it is not video or audio based.
Just took a whole bunch of still photographs and put them together.
Had a flip book.
And then we get it, well, then it's like how.
Cartoon flip book.
Do you have an actual question?
I do. I guess, so I was a little bit surprised by this actually, because I had really thought, I guess I thought that we would have other ways of assessing people than using
Oh,
recording.
it wasn't, I mean, so we talked about a lot of different things, and I'll just tell you quickly that the committee, and I think we talked about this, committee really got into, the goal of the committee is not strictly supervision What does that look like? And how can we do it in a more regular cadence than people are getting now? And one of the conclusions from folks was, well, if that's exclusively about your principal going through some type of steps to give you feedback, there's two things. One, that's great on one level, but two, the cadence at which we can give you more regular kind of stuff is really limited by that. And two, so people are saying, it's great that I have my supervisor doing some basic checking on what I'm doing, but what I really want to hear from, if I'm a fourth grade teacher, is another fourth grade teacher who is observing what I'm doing and giving me, and saying, hey, this was what was great and this what wasn't so good. Also, we talked a lot about how do we create more organized self-reflection opportunities that are grounded in some artifact. So we were really excited about these. And I think there's a trend outside of places with parental bills of rights that do things to move in this direction. Because I think people are finding that traditional systems are not adequate. And so we were excited about this as a concept, had moved in this direction, had worked really hard to pick vendors, and then we're moving in the direction of the pilots that we were going to do, and then trying to figure this out now. So some of our work will be to continue to monitor what's happening to see if there's still elements of this that we can incorporate. And some of it will be like, okay, we need a plan B now, in terms of the drawing board for the committee.
Byron, was that a hand?
Yeah, it's a real question, I think. Is there no accordance in law for any sort of like waivers or ability for students to opt? Yeah.
So what you would need right now is you need based on most folks reading the law, opt out. What we use right now for like social media notification and stuff is an opt out. So you'd let us know at the beginning of the year when you do your enrollment forms, I prefer not to have my child be part of these types of things. This right now reading is this requires opt-in, and we require opt-in from, so let's say, for example, we were going to record a portion of a class. Every kid in the class would have to have an individual waiver to do it, regardless of what.
For that specific recording event.
Depends on, so then there's conversations about that and to what extent could we do a blanket request? So this is part of the conversation we're gonna have with legal. We have the ability to say, we have an opt-in and say, hey, as part of growing our the skills of our teaching staff, we use these tools, this is what we do, here's what we do with those recordings when we're done, those types of things. Then could we do a blanket opt-in? And then people who didn't opt in, then we monitor those classes. We try to figure out which ones we can record, which ones we can't. So there's a little bit of kind of at the moment trying to figure out how do we navigate that as a system and still move in the direction of trying. We're in a little bit of a holding pattern as we try to figure out those two routes. So, and hopefully we're able to record graduate. That's, those types of things too. I think I had a quick conversation on a side note. And well, I think you guys have seen Britt before. She's come in to talk about DE classes and credits and all those types of things. Britt's a go-getter and is determined that if Zach, I had to have a signature from every single family in the district in order to do this, I would get it. And I'm like, okay,
no problem.
Okay, we'll see. So anyway, so stay tuned. I will say that at the moment we continue to use Huddle, which is a live streaming product connected to our athletic events. So that's still at the moment ongoing, pending a conversation with City Legal this upcoming week, where we're going to do a little bit more in-depth review. So,
other questions? So I have two quick ones on this. I do think it would be helpful to have a report back sooner rather than later on what types of curriculum and other changes might be impacted. Because there's concern in the performing arts, like there's concern in special education with students who have accommodations that would now be impacted. Probably a whole bunch of stuff I haven't thought of, but I think just to know where the areas are that this could impact
And performing arts is definitely one of them because
That's a
like
big concern.
goodbye concerts being recorded.
Not just before,
and-
their
which is all-
summatives
so many-
are all
yeah, summative
recorded.
evaluations. Yeah, there's a lot of things. So
For solid academic reason.
Yep.
And then I think my other question is just in terms of the focus area 2. I wouldn't necessarily speak for the entire board, but I would say broadly that our intention was to get to a point of annual evaluations. And I guess what I'm looking for is what are we doing now that we know this to evaluate people? Even if it's not the perfect thing that we'd like to have
Sure.
once we are able to reconvene and do the more thoughtful thing that would give people more meaningful feedback. But I think there's a concern about every year when we re-up the contracts in April,
sure. Yeah.
we don't necessarily have evaluations being done. So I think a report back sooner rather than later on how we are going to evaluate people.
Yep.
While we're figuring this out.
Yep.
Would be.
Well, we continue the old process. So, but that is not annual.
Right.
So I don't anticipate that there's going to be, you'll have something on the ground that over the course of this year would answer what you're talking
Fair.
about. So, but I'm happy to report
When you-
back on where.
Gave us the update last on focus area 2 before this threw a wrench in the works. The intention was to do the pilots this year.
Yes.
And then pick one for next year
Correct.
to roll out.
Yep.
So I guess the question would really be, what can we roll out next year?
And
Instead,
that's gonna be the work.
these pilots are not gonna be what we can roll out next year.
Sure. And I think that's work of the committee. And some of that will be, we'll come back with something from the committee.
Okay, no, that's fair. Are there any other questions? I didn't mean to. We next have.
Yes.
Our one-time certificate of eligibility.
Can I just,
Oh, I'm sorry.
there's an action next to that. Was there an action we have to do?
That was a mistake.
As a mistake.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I didn't.
No action needed.
Right, good, because I didn't understand what the action was, so I need.
I clearly didn't either. Thanks, Tish.
So we have a lot of leaves at the high school that require substitute teachers. And because of the state law that says that individuals can only sub for 20 days in the same assignment before they have to be certified, I'm coming to the board to ask the board to approve a one-time certificate of eligibility as outlined in RSA 18939B for Nushin Davis, who is going to be defending her PhD in space physics, and she will be, hopefully, if this is approved by the board, subbing at the high school in math and science, which are two areas of shortage, and she's a great candidate, but she's not certified, and she will be with us longer than 20 days, but less than the year that it would require for her to go through the full alternate certification process with the state.
Move to approve.
Second.
That's where the action should be.
That's it.
There it is. Yeah, you're right.
It is
You're
there.
right.
More
Yes.
action. Okay, roll call.
Any discussion?
So
Sorry.
just to be clear, your opinion is she's totally certain.
She's absolutely qualified for this.
Just wanted for the record.
Yep, absolutely qualified. Yes.
I just have one question. Did you say she was working on her certification currently? Or
She,
that-
no, she's not. She's working, she's gonna be defending her PhD this week.
Got it, that, okay.
Okay, Jen Shump,
Yes.
Pip Clues,
Yes.
Stephen Adler,
Yes.
Byron Maddow,
Yes.
Brian French,
Yes.
Lisa Rappaport,
Yes.
Nancy Claiberg,
Yes.
Tish Campbell,
Yes.
Lee Hudson.
Yes.
Okay, approved. Thank you.
We are on to committee updates, and I believe you've all received an updated list of committee assignments.
Jumped over something.
Did I? I'm so sorry. What did I skip? Oh,
Consideration.
Rules, of
approval.
course.
Yes.
I apologize. I had really bad allergies and I took Benadryl tonight and it's clearly making me a little. All right. Consideration and approval of school board rules and orders. And just to tell all of the new members, we try to review these every couple of years after the election to make sure that everybody's on the same page just in terms of how we conduct our business so that we can be efficient and follow relevant state laws in terms of doing the public's business in public. I think we were going to make a single change to these that I had proposed around the committee assignments. because my thought there was that it may have read previously like we're encouraging people to miss several meetings in a row. So I thought removing that language might send the message that we would like everyone to attend all of their meetings. And I don't believe there's any other changes in there. So I would take a motion to pass those, and then we can see if there is any discussion or any other requests for changes.
It's not in here, but when we take a vote, I think we should stagger how we do the votes. You know what I mean?
I
Start
second
with
that.
Jennifer.
So
Jen doesn't have to hit lead off every time.
So we're following our rules. Do we have a motion to pass these?
Oh, yeah.
So moved. Oh, second.
And a second. And then that's a
That's
fair.
Yeah.
I feel like we have done that off and on.
Thing you guys did, and no, every meeting since you have not. I have been first to answer every time.
Yeah, no, that's very fair.
I've always
Um,
done
You
this
need
end
a
and
rule,
it's
just
stressful.
do it.
I think we can do
It's
that.
really
Headache
really
right now.
challenging.
I don't know that we necessarily need a rule to do that, but it's a fair point, and it definitely changes who's on the spot. Ryan.
Sorry.
I would, just thinking about the change that you made in for Rule 17. I think the other piece that we talked about was like, expectations of people being on these committees, and I don't know if we want to codify that in the language, but the idea is that if you miss a meeting, you let us know so we could try to get a sub. And that way, I don't know if we want to codify it in there, but I think that's a good one.
I agree, and I think when we were getting this ready for the agenda, we weren't exactly sure what that language would be.
Yeah.
But I think the intent would be, yes, that people attend committees or get a sub. And Pip, did you have a
Go
question?
ahead
about
if you're
that?
gonna finish.
No, I think that
I
that was the
do.
main issue.
Okay, I mean, I think that makes sense for somewhere where we are just sort of representatives going to another, an outside committee, like a city committee or something, but I think on the standing committees, it might be a little odd. Because, well, I guess I'm thinking like of policy committee, for instance, because there's a lot of, they kind of build on each other, those meetings, and so sometimes I think there would be some back knowledge that the person wouldn't be familiar with. And there's also like a lot of review that has to happen before you show up to the meeting, so if somebody's canceling last minute, well, usually we reschedule if we can't all be there. But if somebody's showing up last minute, it would be a little bit hard for them to kind of see where they needed to be to
That's
be useful.
fair, and I think if we wanted to look at what Brian's thinking about adding, I think for the school district standing committees and the city committees, it would certainly be reasonable to say get a sub, because our role in those is not necessarily to run the committees.
I think
Our
that
role
makes
is more to attend and report back. I can see where it could be more challenging if the board committees have ongoing work and then somebody steps in the middle. So that's fair. I was just thinking, I just want to make sure we're not inadvertently causing some weird problem in the rules. I guess we could say with the exception of school board committees, you're expected to get a sub. Does that type of?
Yeah, or it could just be simply notifying the chair that you can't be there. And you can make the decision of can you get us
Also
up?
fair?
One other wrinkle in this too is just this week, we received from the city clerk's office a request for our attendance at all meetings of all, this is not just to us, it went out to all, boards and commissions and departments, of a record be submitted to the city clerk's office of all the attendance of people who sit on boards and committees from the previous year, which is connected back to, they quoted some language in the charter around that. So we haven't had an opportunity to do some follow-up yet in the city clerk's office, but this did just come to us, and it includes some language about the removal of some folks who miss at least 3 sessions. So that, though, I think there's some interesting, that doesn't necessarily apply to you as a school board member, board or anything. So there's a little bit of stuff that I think there's some nuance with the city clerk's office we want to clarify. But they have requested that we submit attendance sheets or a list of attendance for all different boards and commissions connected with us.
So you don't think that applies to the school board itself?
I'm trying to read the way, and I think the charter doesn't speak to that. So we haven't had the opportunity to follow up. Our intent has been, we need to figure out exactly what they're asking for and then make sure that we do a good job of record keeping going forward. And I'm trying to find the actual document. I don't have it in front of me right now.
So independent of that, I can't think of a reason we couldn't at least say, if we want to, that members who will miss a committee meeting should notify the chair in advance.
The chair of that committee or the.
So, all right, so this is where we were trying to figure out how to word it, because, okay, so if, I think I would like to know for any committee, because if we're supposed to be represented on a city committee and you can't go, then I want to be able to assign a different board member to go instead of you. You might have a schedule conflict or your job might change, whatever it is. And then separately, for example, if you are on the, rec board and you can't go, it would also be nice to let the chair of that committee know. So I think for our rules, I would like to know if there's a committee that you can't attend, just because.
This is like a one-time, like, hey, I'm sick, I can't make this.
Yeah, because.
Or hey, I can't make it for the next few months.
You can't make it for the next few months. Yes, both. And if it's months, we might then say, well, then maybe we'll see if there's
Yeah.
somebody else who can go on to that committee.
Okay.
If it's you're sick or traveling or something.
Just trying to get
life happens.
someone else to step in,
Yeah.
to be a representative. Okay.
Jen, you had a question?
Is there a schedule that will be posted for each committee?
So.
Is that just with like young kids? It's really-
No, absolutely. So there's a schedule that is on the committee assignments, but I will say that once we do the new assignments every time, then the first thing that happens is the members of that committee get together to confirm. They can all show up at the time that it's been meeting, and sometimes, but not always, we shift it around depending. Because sometimes, for example, there's school district staff where they've built in this time into their schedule. So then we try our best to keep to that schedule for them, especially for the ones that need to meet during the school day. But I would say as much as we can, we try to adjust the times where possible as new people come on the board and old people leave, because people might have a slightly different scheduling day. Does that?
Yeah, that is.
So you're probably on some committees right now that may not even be scheduled.
Got it.
So as far as the rules, do we want to add a line to that, or we do want to leave it alone for now? I am fine with either way.
I think it can just be an understanding. If you can't make a meeting, let the chair know.
Yeah. Gentleman's agreement.
Yeah, I don't know if you have to.
So only men have to do it.
Only men.
I like that.
Gentle.
Men, gentlemen.
Gentle people.
agreement.
Okay.
Showing my age.
So I think it makes sense to put it in the rules if
all right.
we are. If it's something that, that will sort of guide how we operate. And we already have information about committees, so I would be in support of having it in there. But I'm also okay. I could go either way.
I could go either way, but I do agree with what you're saying, because there is a standard to showing up at the meetings, that if you're just like, I'm on rec now, if I just didn't show up and didn't let you know, you would just assume, geez, Tish is going once a month to the rec committee. And then you're gonna get an email saying, why is it the school board up there?
Fair.
It keeps you informed.
That has happened sometimes with
And
different.
that's why we're
committees.
talking about it. 'cause
Exactly.
It has happened and you're like, why are the school board members showing?
Right, so,
So-
no, you know what?
Can we make a friendly amendment to the motion to add simply to the end of Rule 17? Members shall notify the school board chair in advance when they can't attend committees.
As soon as they know they can't attend?
Yeah.
Because that is like, if I wake
I'm
up,
just trying, yep, in advance, that
Yeah.
covers whatever. I mean, if you can't, you can't. People get
Right.
sick, life happens. But Is that?
Do you want to say just for city committees and temporary committees? Or
Nope.
do you want to say?
If you're skipping your school board committees, we are going to find other people to go to those committees instead of you.
Okay, so just the school board, ad hoc committees and the city committees.
So
Oh.
period, full stop, members will notify the chair when in advance when they can't attend a committee they're assigned to.
Yeah.
And then it's to your discretion whether or not to find
Somebody
a
to
replacement.
take their place.
If we can, yeah.
Right,
I
yeah.
mean, if it's got sick on the way to the meeting, maybe not, but like. Is that fair? All
Yeah.
right, so
Fair.
I make that motion. Can I have a second to that
Second.
friendly amendment? Any other discussion on this?
I'm sorry.
That wasn't a hand,
Is-
sorry.
What's happening over
Is
here?
this just on the addition or is this, are you now asking for discussion on the whole, on all the rules?
Just on that piece. Okay. Any other discussion on the rest of the rules?
Okay, on Rule 19, it states that meeting minutes must be available to the public within 72 hours. So I'm recalling that we had this discussion a few years ago and settled on that. But legally, I think we have 5 days to publish minutes. So I just wanted to note that there's a difference there and discuss whether we want to keep it this way.
Know the answer to that.
Or
She would.
well, I mean, legally it is 5 business days. But but I think we chose this for a reason, which is why I'm asking about it, because I know we haven't done this with policy. We've gone with the 5 business days,
If I
but
recall, the 72 hours was to try to get a better job of getting the minutes in time to get them into the board packet for some of the committee meetings. Because often when you follow that 5 days,
Yeah,
it
it's
means
the whole-
that there's another 2 weeks or more before it gets to the board packet.
it's true, yeah.
I don't know if that's
So
burdensome.
So I think in 91A, I think where the provision comes from, the right to know stuff, it's 72 hours is for non-public
Non-public.
sessions. So non-public sessions must, unless sealed, must be made available to the public upon request within 72 hours after the meeting. So non-public's got to be out there quicker.
Got it.
So that can be edited. And it's available to the public within 5 business days.
Well, then we are back into the situation where it'll be like 2 weeks or more before the board has those minutes. So that might get us into a cycle again where we're voting on things as a board
Haven't
and the
seen them.
committee minutes haven't been submitted to the board yet. And I think that's what we were trying to correct with the 72 hours.
Maybe that's right, yep.
I don't know, there's.
Well, I can just say it, policy has struggled to meet the 5-day requirement, but we can do better.
There are other, I don't know. I mean, I don't want to create an undue burden for people in terms of the minutes if we feel like strongly about changing it, but I do think that the more we push it out, the less we're getting timely information. Other questions on the rules? Can we take a roll call vote on the rules with the one change to Rule 17?
Byron Maddow,
Yes. No, you don't like this rotation thing, do you?
Stephen Adler,
Yes.
Pip Clues,
Yes.
Jennifer Shump,
Yes.
Brian French, Lisa Rappaport, Nancy Claiberg.
Yes.
Tish Campbell.
Yes.
Lee Hudson.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Now we're on to committee updates, and I feel like the question on the committees was already asked, but we have emailed out the committee assignments. The board does not vote on those assignments in terms of which people are on which committees. But if anyone sees a problem with the assignments and wants to let us know, we can always try to accommodate that. The times are not set in stone for some of them right now. I'd say for some of them, we may have to do a little detective work at this point to see what time certain committees are meeting at this point in time. But if there becomes a conflict, we can always move that around. At the next meeting, we are going to take a vote on a couple of action items related to committees. One is to propose, at this point, it's a working group to discuss setting up a new community engagement committee, which Nancy's going to spearhead. I had a proposal that would be an action item, although now we'll have to have more discussion about that, about having a committee to have quarterly reports on focus area 2 of our strategic plan, on building educator capacity, because we have committees that meet quarterly for the other focus areas, but not for that one. And I think we also wanted to have a discussion about our finance committee being a school board committee. And there's some question in terms of how that committee was established, about whether that was or was not the intention originally. And even Paulette dug up the motion and it didn't specify in the motion. So I'd say to err on the side of good governance, we should discuss it and just take another look at that in terms of what our intention is at this time. And then I think we're also proposing to eliminate the legislative committee, which, because we took a vote to set it up, we have to take a vote to remove it. And a few other ones, redistricting and building needs, would potentially fold into facilities. So that will be all coming on February 10th. And I would say if you are assigned to a committee and that committee normally meets once a month, those committees may start meeting as of now without waiting for more voting or other decisions to be made, especially for the board committees. And the rest will be discussed February 10th. Did you have a question about this, Nancy?
For instance, I'm on the focus area 3. So will they notify, if there's no name there for me to let them know that I'm the person, will they notify me when they have their meeting? Will they know that it's me?
So focus area 3 is a good question and an area of discussion, because our wellness committee is one of those ones where not only has nobody gone, it hasn't met for a very long time. But we already have a committee that has been established by the board to serve that purpose. So we didn't think we needed to create a separate committee to focus on student well-being if we already have a wellness committee. But we need to figure out who's going to be the staff person who would take point on that and then get that back up and running again. So I'd say that's also a fair thing to discuss on the 10th when we're going through all the committees in more detail. Okay, thank you. But a very good question.
If there's a committee we don't think would be right for us, do we just give you a heads up on that?
If there's something where you know out of the gate, either, you know, it's going to always meet during the day and I work during the day, or something where it's like on a day of the week where you can never come, let me know and let Brian know and we can take a look at it. We try our best to balance things out in terms of people's work schedules and availability. And I would say for the negotiating committees, pretty much everybody gets at least one of those. They're only every few years, but there's enough of them that we need everybody to sort of take one for the team. And I'd say most of the rest of it, if we need to shuffle it around, we can. Other questions on this?
The negotiating teams are interesting.
That is true.
It's kind of
All right. So that's just an update. Any other future agenda requests? You could ask now. You can also email myself and Brian if things come up in the future that you'd like us to discuss putting on the agenda. All right, hearing nothing, we'll reopen public comment if anyone in the room would like to speak for public comment. And I believe for these, this is regular public comment, so it would be to the 3 minutes if you can try it. There. You can state your name again just for the.
And listening to the board discuss what I had said about actuals. Chapter 32 is municipal budget law. It's an RSA. It's required. It's not optional. You are out of compliance. That's all I have to say. This is board responsibility. As far as having a lot of data, which was discussed here, I do believe it will help the board a lot if you can trend, if you could look at what you did, if you could look at how things are moving. And if you look at what Dover is putting out, it's not a lot of data. It's another column, and the data is available. The next thing, in listening to the discussions, you're talking about FTEs and how the city does it and how you do it and put it together. If you look in the city's budget book, in the back, there's a statistical section, which you should be the same, the numbers shouldn't be any different. So that might help you in that area. The last thing would be discussion that you were just doing on your rules and having minutes. That's part of 91A. So I urge you to look at the law and what they tell you, so you don't get out of compliance on that, if that'll help you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Esther Kennedy, Portsmouth. I kind of want to just talk about the actuals, and there's a lot of great examples out there. I know Brian's seen them at this meeting. I know we do actuals. I really feel that it's not a lot of pages, because all the actuals, the line items are the same no matter what district you go to. So the line items are the same. And so it's not a lot of information, but it's really good information. But I also encourage you all to go to the DOE 25 for if you want to look up some information about your district, about finances. And as far as the grants, I have done the grants for a number of years for my district, and they go back quite a few years. And you can just download those and give them out. It's very simple to do. I do it all the time. And the other thing is, for your auditors, you have federal line items. So you know what you spend in Title I, you know what you spend in IDA. I did not see Title II up there. I do not see the ESOL grant up there, but you know what you can, what is spent and what areas are spent in, just by looking at those actuals. And again, those numbers are the same no matter what district you go in, where you go in. I encourage you to go online. Most districts put their stuff up online, so you can look at what Dover did. Is very equatable to most districts. I've been fortunate to work for the state as a mentor for the last 9 years, and I do a lot with budgets and difference. And right now I'm in Manchester doing some work. So the line items are the same. So if you went to Guilford, you can see there's a question about the legal fees. You can see how much I spend because the line item is special ed legal fees. You can see what our superintendent's in the 10 accounts. So every account has its numbers, and it's in the 10 accounts, which is district wide. And you can see so that can be a line item. In many districts, that is a line item because it's a big expense and legal fees. Last, I'd like to end with the confidentiality. Just like the superintendent has said, we have the 11 rule. If it's more than 11 students, then we can present it. If it's less than 11 students, then we can't. But as a school board, you have the right to go to non-public and have a conversation about these out-of-district placements. And you have that right. And I'd encourage you to take that right, because you should have some kind of knowledge. Now, you're not going to be able to go into a lot of details. Superintendent's not going to be able to do that. But you can find out what kind of payments you're paying to these places. Currently, right now, in your budget, you can see what payments you're making. Again, I wouldn't do that because you see there's one on each line. That's not the 11 rule. So I would encourage you to have that conversation. But on the upside, I would also encourage you to have a conversation about how you're going to make Portsmouth a place where kids can stay, where they can be part of their community.
Thank you,
And
Esther.
that's what we need. Thank you.
Do not do online public comment at the end, so I will take a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Roll call for Lee.
Ryan French,
Yes.
Byron Meadow,
Yes.
Stephen Adler,
Yes.
Pip Blues,
Yes.
Jen Shump. Lisa Rappaport, Nancy Claiborne.
No.
Yes. Tish Campbell.
Yes.
Lee Hudson.
Yes.
She's awesome. Yeah, I know, right?
It's so
Feisty over there.
Yeah.